Welcome in.
Welcome in, welcome in. Welcome back to Do It for the Story. I'm Morgan.
And I'm Stacey. And
here we go.
Here we go.
All right, what are we talking about on today's episode? I feel like you had a little, from our quick prep, you had a fun night last night.
I had
specific convos came up.
A fun night last night. Joe and I went out Friday night, which is not really typical for us anymore. You know, Fridays are hard after work. But we went out.
Just to quickly, can you imagine us saying that 10 years ago?
No.
Like lived for Friday night.
But honestly, even when I remember when I was 30 and single, being like, fuck, I have to go out Friday nights again, because it's just sometimes you just want to chill. Like Saturday, I rally.
That is sad. I didn't even mean 10 years ago. I forgot that I'm 40. Like I literally was thinking in our 20s.
Yeah.
So I really mean 15, 20.
So she's talking about 15, 20 years ago.
Oh my God, back to the story.
But so Joe and I went out with some friends here in Annapolis in Eastport. Some of his fishing buddies and their girlfriends and
Partners,
wives, everybody.
Yeah.
And so we had a good little time. It also was snowing here.
Yeah, where'd you guys go?
So we went to
For our locals.
Yeah, we went to Forward Brewing.
Love it.
And just were able to walk over. So it was fun, an actual snow day. We all hadn't really had that. I mean, not that it was a snow day because everybody works remote, so we had to still work.
Yeah, well, some people did have snow days, and I loved that for them. Like, it was fun to see, like, my teacher friends and stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like the old days for a second.
Yeah, and just, I was happy for the kids.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Like
all the
my
kids
sweet
outside.
nephew, your son, Angel.
Yeah. My Angel.
His pseudo name.
Yeah, we've decided it's Angel.
Able to just experience snow. So it was really fun, and it kind of brought me back to those DC days of like living in Glover Park where it would snow and you would just go on a walk to a bar and cozy up and just be drunk and high and with friends and meeting like local friends, new people. 'Cause everybody's in the same vibe.
You have to walk. You're in the same vibe.
With little duck boots on and a sweater.
And that's a good location because not only is it cute, they've got the food, they've got the drinks, but also you can see the snow the whole time. It's all windows.
It's beautiful. So we actually, even before we went, because we were trying to actually go to that new spot, Chessie's.
Yes.
The bar
oh my God. I want to
in
go.
West Annapolis.
So
but
cute.
it was packed. Opening week for them.
So glad for them.
We relocated, met up with everybody, and we actually stood outside for a little while at like the friend's house where we met up to walk together. And just,
I thought you were saying
the boys were like
in.
kids kind of playing in the snow
cute.
for a minute, just hanging out, everybody having a little cocktail.
Yeah.
So anyway, when we got to the bar, one of the couples who, again, we met them before, but we were all just getting to know each other a bit more.
Right.
We're hitting it off and just chatting. They had like a similar timeline of us with being engaged and getting married. And, so it was good vibes.
I forget if you said this. So everybody, only because I know them, everyone you're with is partnered up, but no kids.
Yeah, there were 3 couples. And yes, everybody 30s.
Yeah.
No kids.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
Or like maybe even late 20s. I don't know. Yeah. One of them. I didn't ask, but I'm like, you don't really care.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we're chatting and sharing our experience of both being Joe and I got engaged 7 days before quarantine started.
Oh my God.
In DC. That's another episode.
We need to ask our brother-in-law if we can flash up during this episode that photo of him with the Corona beers, because literally it's now on our rolling screensaver on our TV.
Yeah, so what she's referencing is at our engagement party.
Yeah.
He was wearing like sunglasses. It was not.
We didn't know what.
I don't even want to get into that'll be a whole tangent. But so they also got engaged, same timeline. Like Joe and I kept saying we were core engaged because it was literally like, we're engaged. Now we're moving in together.
Kind of perfect though.
It was great.
Not to get on that tangent. We'll have a conversation about that later.
So we were all laughing about that. So anyway, we're bonding, blah, blah, blah. And then the one, he was husband asked me, he's like, can I ask you something personal towards the end of the night? And I honestly hesitated.
As I say, my chest is getting tight.
I was like, don't ask me, what are you? Like, I don't think you're going to ask me that because.
But it's always hard with new friends that are all white.
Yeah. And not like, I wasn't judging
not in a bad way, but just like, you sometimes.
But when someone says personal, that's usually what they say to me.
Yeah. Like, and not in that space that you would have been offended if they asked you something about race, if they teed it up in the right way, because I guess you have met them before. I'm just trying to say it's not like, but
and we've met them before, hung out with them before, and
but you don't necessarily always want to have that conversation,
right? So blah blah blah. It and because I was turned, that's why I was like,
right. But that wasn't the question.
And he said, have you all thought about having kids, or kind of where are you on that? And I had, to be clear too, I also had already given an opening because there was something else that we were talking about, and I said, "Look, I love this. I'm a very I'm a vulnerable person."
Yeah. So he was like, "Okay."
Yeah. So he then was like, "Okay," like we had talked about some things already that I was giving that opening, that energy, and so he asked me that, and I was like, one,
we're in the midst of it.
Yes, one, because you and I had just been talking about
literally an hour before,
the fertility stuff, and two, that was another topic I talked about.
I know these drinks are so good right now.
Is just in the fertility journey, it's not just about like, are you going to have kids? Or I think for millennials too, I mean, you see the decline in, people, one, waiting longer to have children, older, and then, having fewer children or choosing just to be child free.
Right.
And I think some people think there's like this myth behind it, but I'm like, also like, have you seen the economy?
Well, and let's specifically, this is a very large topic because the age group that is having kids right now largely are millennials, and millennials are what's the stat? Like the poorest
we're the
generation.
Most educated and the poorest in terms of like what wealth we have versus the generation before us at this time in their lives.
Yeah. And so we have so many factors,
pensions aren't a thing.
Right. So there's so many reasons.
401k matches are hard to come by.
Right.
And then inflation's insane. Mortgage rates at 8%.
Yeah, so you have a lot of people that are just trying to figure out how to pay their own bills
and pay off college debt,
right?
And grad school debt,
and so it's hard to think of. Let me bring a child into the world if I can't even, I haven't even paid off my debts, and we're being told, oh, when you have a kid, that's when you start your 50 whatever, college fund. I'm like, you and I are lucky that we've paid off our loans.
Yeah.
But
thank you, Mom and Dad, for your help.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people that are of millennials that, haven't been able to pay off their loans. So we can understand why this question's happening.
Totally. Yeah. Just, and again, like you're saying, many factors, but just on the financial sense of one-to-one, because there's always bad shit going on in every generation, wars, famine, whatever, you know, that, but we also are more educated,
right?
In that we are going to weigh these pros and cons and dig deeper and do more research rather than just being like, and we do have access to things like birth control,
right?
And no longer abortion.
Yeah.
Depending, unless you're in the state of Maryland, we love you, Wes, more.
Wes,
we love
Can't
you,
wait to
Wes,
have you on
more.
the pod.
We love you, Wes. And we love you, Dawn.
Oh my gosh, I would love to have Dawn.
Anyway,
yeah.
So he, mentioned this, and I was like, totally love that you're asking me this, because I said, first of all, on having kids, and I said again, in radical honesty here, Joe and I will have to do IVF to have children naturally. And he was, of course, I know people I didn't want him to feel bad about that, like asking. And I said, and I know that because, and I, said to his wife, like, I have PCOS, which she kind of nodded, like, heard about it, knew. And I said, but because we kind of assumed, had a strong hunch, pre-diagnosis that I was going to have to do IVF, it's almost like we've had so many conversations, because it's not so simple as like, honestly, we don't worry about there being like a whoops or like I just
right.
You could say I don't need to get into that, but it's
you got a natural birth control situation.
Well, yeah, I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
It's just like, wish I knew that at 16, 17, 18. But so anyway, I said to him, so we have to do IVF. And I said, and because I'm 36 and they're a bit younger in their 30s. And I said, so for me, especially, it was more of as we got further to that, I'm already in my 30s when we're dating. 34 when we got married. And now I'm 36. So for us, I had to then make that choice of like, what are we going to do about this? I said, so first step, because we also, I think like them, when we're dating, you're like, yes, of course we're going to have kids. Like I told you that, like, you know, I'll do the IVF thing when we're dating. And it's like anything. It's like when you're 20 and you're like, when I get married, everything seems so far off and life catches up quickly.
Yep.
And 30 for women, it's not just that it's the societal age of you should have your shit together. It really is that we're humans. It's not like we are evolving to what culture and education has allowed for us, that my body now is like, you could have babies when you're 60.
Right.
So we had to make that decision. But so like we talk about in one of the other episodes, I won't get into the full like steps of the IVF, but I told him like, so first step kind of just to help us in the conversation was like, number one, regardless, I have to get officially diagnosed.
Right.
I said, but we really had a lot of conversations about it because, and I told him, I was like, I don't need to bore you with or get into the IVF topic if you're not something that you may not ever need to even be on. But some of that changed should we do this, should we not, because of my experience, which we'll talk about in another episode, just doing the egg retrieval. But I said, of course you have these questions of a little bit like, am I trying to, maybe this is the universe, God saying, different path. Like, why am I forcing this? I love my life. We have so much fun. I've seen other family friends, or especially like gay couples that have chosen not to adopt or do surrogacy and be child free. Like they're living their life, having a good time.
Right.
So then you go back and forth,
right?
Especially because the older you get, especially for women, you know, my career was like this at 30. Probably took a little dump. And then it just trajectory started going up in terms of money, my salary, benefits and things. And also just where I was that you're like, I finally just started to be able to your point about the money, I finally got to move out of the studio apartment.
I was going to say you finally, and we probably, I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but that you're living in the first piece of property that you've ever bought.
Yes.
Your first home. And I say piece of property because, you know, there's been nothing until, you know, this point.
Yeah.
And so knowing how hard you had to work to get here, you couldn't have bought one 5 years ago. Yeah.
I couldn't afford to live in my own 1-bedroom apartment in Baltimore in 2017. Baltimore one doesn't have a ton of like 1-bedroom.
It's not a lot of studio. Yeah.
But I couldn't afford to live there with the job I had at that moment and be able to pay my benefits because I was a contractor, so I didn't have health insurance, and I was a contractor, so I didn't get PTO. And
you were a contractor, so you didn't have job security.
Exactly. And I didn't, so I did that too, so I could save a little bit, and I didn't have a 401k or retirement through that job. So I was also doing it so I compromised by being a roommate with living in my friend's home, renting a room.
Which thank God you had a good friend that you didn't have to go with a random.
Ball. That'll be another episode too.
Right.
Go live with men in your 30s, women. Get a confidence boost and some good times. But so yeah, the big thing, like you're saying, money, I would take a hunch is the number one factor for most millennials, right? Of like, how are we going to do this? Okay, we're doing this now, but then childcare is like having a second fucking mortgage.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know other places, you know better than I do, but I remember like in DC, on average, my friends were paying, I remember one, actually Kiki saying it was like $1,800 a month, and she had like a good situation of like some kind of, I don't know the right word, government like affiliated daycare situation, but it's like $1,800.
It's expensive
for 5 days, and then if there's a school closure, you're out of luck, all that. So anyway, so we're talking, so he mentions this, like, what have you talked about? And he said, we've been reading a lot of books. And I'm like, you know, I read some, again, I went to the podcast world and read some articles, and there was this one, I think it was like actually someone on a Reddit thread reposted an article that was written by Cheryl Strayed, like a Dear Sugar situation. And in the article, Cheryl Strayed talks about, I'm pretty sure it was her. I really should have done it better. I kind of forgot about this, honestly, until now. Talks about how she had a daughter, but wasn't ready to like have kids when she had them. Or saying when you have to make that decision, no one's ever ready. No one's ever right. There's never a right time. Yeah. But saying like what her life was like before, and then kind of like you'll always be happy. It'll be different if you're a happy person and that's what you want. And also in her kind of recommendation to this person who was like, we're trying to figure out, should we have kids or not? It was like, go through this exercise of trying to picture yourself in a future life with children and without them, and do it consciously where you're not just focused, because it's very easy to focus on the without because you're already in that life. I know what that looks like, and I know what it could look like if, life keeps building in the way that it has. But then you're like, well, what else? So, and it's kind of like I said to Joe, well, if we didn't have kids, what would we do? Would I quit my job because we don't have to make as much? I mean, one, I couldn't. We wouldn't be able to afford our home. I mean, let's be real. That's the other thing too. Even without children, it's like we both have to work. Right. And I'm like, would we take longer vacations? I'm like, if I stay in the job that I am in right now, I'm still going to have the same predicaments of, sure, you might take more international trips or stay in a higher star hotel. But it came down to me, the holiday time, and it's not about, and it never should be, caring for later on. Like when I'm older, who's going to take care of
having
me?
Like a nurse. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause you don't know, your kid could be like, bye, I'm moving across the country, the world.
Totally.
But anyway, so he continued to say that it was a conversation that they've been having and looking at like, an aunt and uncle that they know that also don't have it was the same conversation that Joe and I had. Yeah. And I remember actually talking to you about it. Yeah. I think when we were prepping for this podcast, like doing a planning day one day, because it was when I had gone in for another fertility appointment and gotten triggered. And for Joe, what he said, where it's mainly for him, the decision, the hesitation. And he said this to the friend, like for me, he's like, it's never logical. It's not going to be a logical decision to just go do something to spend extra money.
Yeah, because while yes, millennials have the least money, and we've already gone through those statistics, but there's never been, a generation. I mean, I'm in the midst of watching like Gilded Age, for example, and
I love it.
That's it takes place where it's hopping around from like 1800s through, early 1900s and in New York City. And so, you have the steel mill workers in Pittsburgh. Certainly was not a time for, easy for them to have kids. There's, plenty
of families. Like
we could say plenty of
stories of why people shouldn't have kids. Right. And the world's always been fucked. And I think because there's a bigger magnifying glass and a bigger megaphone on what's going on, because we do have social media, where it's like in your face all the time. Yeah. But no one would have been trying to have kids if you were a Black person living in, like our grandmother had 7 kids. Right. You wouldn't do that in the 1950s if you wouldn't have had kids if you were worried about where's the state of the world?
Exactly. Because that's a big piece of it, right? I mean, I think when people think about, having kids right now, and the reasons that you're not the first person to have this conversation with, the big things that you hear are obviously financially, and everyone has the same reaction. But I know there's never a good time financially, and that's issues that everybody always has had to deal with. And then you hear about the, women's health issues, because now there's a much bigger conversation around women's health in general. I know even Kamala Harris, she's trying to bring more attention to that. Yep. Vice President Harris. So there's that piece. Then you have,
just mortality overall.
The mortality rate. Exactly. And the women that have lost their lives, and how in the US, how that number is so high.
Yeah. And so just for context for that, I did want to read just like a quick little stat from, this is from an NIH study, and it says, researchers reviewed the number of pregnancy-related deaths in each state between 1999 and 2019. Through 2019, they found that maternal death rates have at least doubled among all people ages 10 to 54 who gave birth during this time. In 2019, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Black individuals were among groups disproportionately affected. By reviewing data within states, researchers also identify regions such as the northern Midwest and South with increased disparities. So that's just for all. And then I want to read this other quick from PBS. This says, but this problem is more common than many people realized, and it's particularly bad for Black women. The CDC estimates in 2021, the maternal mortality rate among Black women was nearly 70 deaths for every 100,000 live births. That's 2.6 times the rate for white women, regardless of income or education.
Yep.
So that piece right there, regardless of income or education,
so triggering.
Is...
Yeah. Which immediately, you reading that, I immediately am thrown to Serena Williams, Tori Bowie, the Olympian.
Yes. Tori Bowie
just died. Yeah. And Serena had a horrific experience that, let's be honest, that's what sent her into retirement. And I understand, she came back, but then deciding to, if I'm going to have kids again, the whole thing. But there's also the piece too, again, like you said, this is all women. Everyone's affected.
Right. Every woman. And the thing is, it's that, and what they were saying is the rate is getting worse. The more technology we have, the more access we have, the higher the mortality rate. And so that's a big piece, again, because that we could go into it very deep. But so that piece too, and that is something that, so even to our friend last night, and that's something Joe and I talked about before, where Joe has said it to me, and that his big thing, so while it's not the, a rational decision, because it never will be, is me, my health.
Right.
Well, something happened to me. And it's not about him being like, your body will change. It's not that. He's literally like, I don't want you to die.
Yeah. Or be. Yeah.
And also, not to talk about your story, but seeing what you went through during childbirth, I was in the room until it was go time, and I have never, Morgan is so strong and has such a high pain tolerance, and I was seeing her not being listened to, medical gaslighting again, in so much pain. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but like literally I remember Joe Donahue peeling you up off the floor of the hospital room, and I'm like, I can't be here for this. Like, me, Dad, and Lindsay walked out of the room, and I literally, because this was, again, you were having contractions. You weren't like into hard.
And this is
you were in a hard labor, but you weren't pushing. It wasn't like we were in there like, she's crowning, we're at the end of the bed. We're not those weirdos. That's a big factor. What could happen, the birth injury, the death of the mother or the child. And so for my Joe, that's a fear for him. And I also did, after going through my egg retrieval, did start back up with therapy. And when my therapist had asked me, like, when it came down to I was like, I just don't know if I should continue to go through with it. Some of it I was dealing with how I was treated during the IVF situation. And I also said, like, look, I saw my sister go through this, and now the actual birth. And then of course, again, another episode of then your autoimmune,
my postpartum,
and your postpartum, everything postpartum,
the
5th trimester, everything. And I was like, that was hard to see. And that last night, friend's wife shared the same sentiment. Said,
I'm sure she's seen it with friends.
Our friend, the woman said she also has sisters, and she's like, I see them with their kids. And we didn't even talk about the birth part, but she was just, parenting is hard. Right. And so she's like, so sometimes I see them too, and your sisters. So when they share, it's just like anything, like people write reviews when the restaurant's shitty. You know, when you have a bad experience, you're more likely to write a review. But maybe not sharing all of the, this is amazing, whatever, the good side of it. So she's like, so sometimes I see them venting to me, being the honest, or I'm watching it like, do you just want me to join you in, she's like, I'm not saying misery, but the expression of join me in your misery, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where I also had said that to you before, like express that, you know, we have this choice. We're really happy. What do we do? Do we even try to go forward with this? And it's just, what was your response? Just give it to him live.
Yeah, no, I don't remember my exact response then, to be honest, but I'm assuming it's the same as what I'm thinking right now.
Well, you said I wasn't, to be clear, when I had to decide to have, you had to make a decision. You didn't have any fertility issues to get you there. Yeah. So it was a matter of, am I going to be like off birth control, not using anything? Like, are we trying?
Right.
And you said, yeah, I was at the same spot in my career.
Yeah, no, I was at the same spot in my career, and it was incredibly stressful, and it was incredibly hard, and which is also why I had the issues that I did with being so late as far as, you know, delivery, because stress, you know, just was delaying me actually going into labor. So, you know, again, I don't honestly remember what I said, but I'm sure what I probably said was, it's a decision that I can't make for you, and I can't make a recommendation. Angel is the best thing that has ever happened to me. That childbirth and the postpartum is the worst thing that ever happened to me. So, and that this children are not the only thing that in life, you know, two things can be true. It can, you know, whatever it may be, marriage can be amazing and awful all at the same time. Yeah. And so I personally think it's not about, you know, no, like Josie was saying, it's not about the logical stuff. It's not about the money. It's about personally for you, because I don't think everyone is built to be a parent. I don't think everyone, you know, I think no matter how you grew up, you can be a great parent, but how you grew up, you need to either make a conscious decision where that was amazing, here's the little things that I would change and, you know, move forward, or that was horrific, here's all the things that I'm going to change.
Right.
I think anyone can become a parent. I don't think where you came from impacts that, but I don't think, you know, if you've had a fucked up childhood and you haven't gone to therapy, you know, I think there's a lot of things that and, you know, really looking back, I wish I had gone to therapy sooner. You know, it was therapy. Actually, I was just listening to, what's her name? Emma something. It's terrible that I'm not remembering. We'll tag it. It's just an amazing podcast, but she had this therapist and who has a podcast about children. And Emma was asking, you know, I was just being super honest. I'm a 30-something and I do want to have kids. I do want to have a family. Like, what are the things that I should start doing now to prepare? Like, do you need to work through all of your trauma? Like, do you need to, you know, so that doesn't impact your kid? And what the therapist responded with was, she said, okay, like, just to be completely honest, ideally you would work through your trauma before, but also I think, meaning this, what the therapist said, if you are also doing that work while you're raising your kid, that's okay too. Like, which was a relief for me, because it's exactly what happened to me. I had a traumatic, you know, experience and situation, and postpartum trauma and literal postpartum depression that sent me to therapy. But thank God for that, because it has allowed me to do a lot of other work on myself growing up biracial that has allowed me to be like, okay, I I'm ready to be a good parent. Like I feel better in that, you know, not that I'm perfect. And I also have that grace now for myself too, where like kids are resilient, you know, you're going to fuck up, but it's being able to, you know, have the conversations with your kid and say, I'm sorry that I yelled at you earlier. Like Angel is not even 4 years old. And I have to say, I'm sorry to him. Like mommy was stressed. I was rushing, shouldn't have snapped at you. Not, you know, that wasn't a big deal. And those are things that
He's so cute.
those are like honest conversations that we have. And, you know, you do end up, you know, learning a lot about yourself and learning a lot about, but it takes a ton of work.
Because that's the thing, and not to cut you off, because I think, and that's what it came up in our couple conversation last night was people that you look to that you trust. Sometimes you're like, are you giving me, of course, like if you say to your parent, I'm not sure about having kids, they're like, I want to be a grandma.
Right.
You know, I'm not saying that's but that's like everyone, you know, they're like, you can't, again, someone else's experience that's in it. They don't know what it's like to be, I mean, most of our parents, if you're a millennial, they don't know what it's like to live alone and not having like not to like have the time without kids.
Yeah.
As long they were like 25ers, 20 to 30.
Yeah.
But it's that also, are my friends telling me the truth or is it bullshit?
And that,
you know,
and
that thing too, like do people, and a lot of times, so on this Reddit too, about like, they call them like fencers, like on the fence, and I'll tag it and it's like a term. I don't know.
Okay.
But that to be child free, to have kids, like you're saying, it's not a choice anyone's going to make for you. But to your point too, about the childhood you had, I think for some people, this has been a theory of mine. Sometimes I think it can be clearer if they didn't maybe have the Disney World upbringing. I felt like ours was Disney World because our parents were so awesome and like there was just so much love in our house. But it wasn't like their childhoods were Disney World. No. Like our dad's dad died when he was 5. So in my mind, I always kind of thought like they get to create the family that they wanted and the type of love that they wanted.
Exactly.
And, you know, and I think there's something beautiful in that
I've seen that with friends of mine, and friends of my husband, you know, that, you know, of course, Joe and I have actively had these conversations because you have them leading up to having kids too, of like, so and so, man, they had such an effed up childhood. You know, I can see why that they've had 4 kids and painted this beautiful Disneyland for them.
Yeah.
You know, because you know, family and creating that is such a beautiful thing. But I'm often, you know, reminded with this conversation, I've seen Michelle Obama say this so many times, that the hardest, you know, 10 years of her marriage were when those kids were young.
And they always say that the most unhappy studies show the most unhappy time in people's marriage are when their kids are the ages between 0 to 10.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. You have to like do shit for someone else.
Right. Well, and so Michelle Obama puts it in the perfect way. She's like, kids are terrorists. They are. They like ruin, you know, but you're not going to blame the kid because they're your little angel.
And they don't know they're being conditioned.
Well, but also they're your little angel.
Yeah,
you're obsessed with them.
Yeah.
So
I don't think they're being conditioned.
Your little
they're literally learning life.
Smacks you across the face, and you're not going to smack him across the face back.
I hope you don't do that.
He's not. I didn't describe my 6-year. You know, he's not 6. You know, and it's not them that you get mad at. You end up getting annoyed with your partner that decided they needed to have, you know, go to happy hour without really asking. And, you know, and then you get,
you're looking for someone because you're like, I know it's not the kid.
It's not the kid's fault. I made this decision to have the kid, and you're looking for, and you don't want to get mad.
Yeah, and you're like, we're in this together.
Right. And you don't want to cause the trauma and for them and all the things. So it is hard. So that's where I'm like, here's my advice for, you know, and this is, I'm not the person, I don't need you to have a kid. I don't need my best friend to. Like I've made this decision for me. So I will tell you straight, like if you do not have, and this is not just for people that are married, this is, you can obviously have a kid through an egg donor and IVF and adoption, all the things. So it's whether if you and your partner are not in a good relationship, if you are single and do not have your shit together and haven't, and I feel like if you're single too, knowing that there's so much pressure, like you need to be additional pressure because you don't have someone else to automatically rely on. You need to be prepared if something unexpectedly happens to you. Who can you rely on to help you, not only financially, but look what happened to me postpartum.
Yeah,
I would have been able to do
village.
right. Do you have the village? Don't use that baby to fill the void of the fact that you don't have an automatic family already. So it's a very serious decision. That you're never going to be prepared for. But is it the biggest gift that you will ever receive? Absolutely. But does that mean that everybody can handle it or everybody's prepared for it? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's just like I look at it as too, like some people are monogamous and some are not. Like you should not trick anyone into being monogamous if like I'm not that person.
Right.
If you don't want kids, you've never said, like that's kind of where Joe and I came down to it was if I had always been like, I'm cool without kids. And some people too, like, especially I think more with men, like that uncomfortable, like I don't want to hold a baby. Like if I knew, if we both had been like, don't want kids, that's different. But we could go through life asking what if, and then we can't do anything about that because there is a window. But so we can try and then we'll just always be happy. And I kind of came through that with my therapist too, where she was like, you think it's going to be this definitive black and white answer of like you think there's going to be some moment of where you're going to definitely know or not. And she's like, and not everyone is that way. And I think what it comes down to is, and that's kind of what not ended, but gave us our pause of like, with this issue, this topic, she was like, that's what it is right there. She's like, I can still tell there's hesitation. And you were like, yeah, we decided we're going to go through with it. And she's like, what's there? I was like, what do you mean? And I said, I think it's also like with IVF. I'm not like upset. I'm not like, oh my God, this is bullshit. I'm not like mad when another one of my girlfriends gets pregnant or whatever. It's different for me because I do think I come from a place of a lot of love and I have nieces and nephews. But again, I felt like, Joe and I met when we were in our 30s. I didn't know if I was going to be married. It wasn't like my goal. Again, my goal was always just happiness. Joe and I are like so happy together that she's like, you're content. And it's okay to say you're happy, but she's like, you're always going to be happy.
Yeah.
She's like, Stacey, I don't know what you want me to tell you. It's just kind of like, if you think there'll be a regret situation, you can't take that back. She was like, I'm not telling you one way or the other, but it's that like, if you.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing is with that too, is like, I remember, it was Joe that was like, we want to have
most
kids.
Times it is the dudes.
Well, whatever. I don't
easy for them. You don't have to fucking be sober for a year and put your body through hell.
I don't know. I feel
take
like
time off work and come back to it.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of women that are like, I'm definitely having a kid and like we're ready to go.
But I feel like when it comes down to the people older, I feel like most in just friendships I know too, the dudes are the one that are like, I want to have a kid. And I'm like, I probably would be like that too if I wasn't the one physically carrying it.
But anyway, so Joe's the one that was like, we got to do this. And because of, all of the things, like I knew my life was going to change forever. All of it, physically, mentally,
your job at the time was super stressful. Insane. So you're like, how the fuck am I going to manage this?
Right. But I will say, with all of that, I have, no regrets. And I was insanely happy. But I'm happier now. I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I'm not saying this because I'm obsessed with Angel. I am. I'm saying it because it's just literally like, life's fucking crazy. Like if I hadn't gone through all of the shit I did with Angel, having him, not getting pregnant, that was easy for me. The birth, the postpartum, I wouldn't have gone to therapy. I really wouldn't have. I probably was like, things are great. Like I would have thought I didn't need it. If I hadn't gone to that therapy, I wouldn't have broken down all of my shit from, really it was racial trauma from childhood. Wouldn't have gotten more comfortable with who I am, how to deal with, relationships that were currently in my life that had been hard, and like needing the validation of like, is it okay to like remove myself from that? And the strength that I had to muster up from the many autoimmune diseases that came from postpartum, which you can't technically prove, but like, the stats are there. So I'm saying it for this moment, that's my theory, is that why it's happened. The awakened. Yeah. And I have never, my body has never been so uncomfortable. Like, I've always, now looking back and knowing all the things that I do, like there was things that were signs. I didn't know because I had always lived that way. Yeah. But I'm in the most pain that I've ever been in. I see the most doctors that I've ever seen in my life. I will always, the list goes on of all of the things that are very difficult for me right now. And I am the happiest I've ever been. So that's where I say, like, it's not a decision that I can make for you. The baby's not going to make you happier. It's knowing that in your gut, and that's why I say, I think if it was me going back, I would just go to therapy now, no matter what, truthfully, no matter what age you are.
I'm doing the right thing.
Right. Do that work, get that stuff taken care of, because for you guys, you're not going to regret having a kid. The biggest worry for me is, your health.
Yes.
Knowing that you already have autoimmune issues.
Same.
I just don't want, what happened to me to happen to you.
And for me, it's the sobriety. Going 9 months without smoking weed. I'm just kidding. But
no, it was
everything you have to stop taking.
No,
I have
it was
ADHD.
fucking
I
horrible.
can't take my medication. Lexapro, you technically can, but you know how it is. If I can't eat sushi, do I want to be, it's a lot of lifestyle change. But I will say, not to tangent again, when you were saying that about, I wouldn't have gone to therapy, it reminds me of this quote, or that, I don't even know if this was someone who said it, but someone repeated it to me when I was going through a tough time. And they were like, God, the universe, whatever you believe in, doesn't put the people and the situations in your life just because. The situations and the people are to shape you into who you're supposed to become.
Yep.
And I mean, same, where I could go on stories.
Well, and it also,
so many stories. I mean, I wouldn't be with Joe if my life didn't turn out the way it did.
And it's I love, and I can't remember if you said this on another episode or not, but I love what your friend who had, if I recall, like a difficult childhood and just a strong person, that I love her motto of, it's not bad luck, it's life. And that resonates with me so much, because it is
everybody
life. Has their shit. Everybody goes through stuff. There are always going to be ups and downs. And that's why I think for us, when we literally start this podcast with like, welcome in, like community, friendships, the people around you, because
that's what last night, the community too. And I said that too to them. I was like, honestly, Joe and I living in Eastport, in Annapolis, that too, I was like, it made me feel more ready to go to that maternal journey of it's a place that's so family friendly. It's more a vibe, like so much what we do.
I'm really know your
I'm like,
neighbors.
hello, we're with Angel and my nephew with Morgan and her husband with JD, Joe Donahue. And Angel's with us all the time, not because it's like, we're doing things where Angel can be included. This is not a town where you go out late. This is a town where you are up to get out on the water. It's a daytime town. So anyway, so just that, but also meeting them last night, you were kind of like, it's more people in your community. And I think, again, never going to be a right situation, a right answer or a wrong one, but
I don't know. Right into us. Like, I would love to know how this resonates with folks.
I flip-flopped a lot. I really, and again, that was different reasons too, because IVF is not for the weak.
No.
And if you're type A and having to let go of control, but trying to control something. Yeah.
Well, and I'll say too, one thing that I want to say before we wrap up, because you commented before that like you kind of always teetered since your 20s of like, do I want to have kids? Do I not? Yeah. I was never that way. I always, the one thing that I felt like I always knew I wanted was a family. And I even remember when I met Joe Donahue and quit my job at the time. It was insanely stressed. And he came in like a freaking...
It was not because of the Donahue she had saved. She's a very independent woman.
100%. No, it wasn't at all the financials. I took care of his ass. I just don't want people
to think that.
No, I took care of his ass. No, it was my money. He didn't, it was...
Yeah, we're over here grinding.
He came and gave... It wasn't that. It was the safety of his personality and presence.
Right,
he said to me, why are you doing this? Why are you so stressed? Like, why don't we take time off? And, he just has such a different approach to life, from how he grew up and then his experience in the Navy.
We're like, I got to have another job lined up.
Yeah. And I was like, wait, what do you mean I can
What do you mean quit? I don't have two offers.
My savings. Yeah. I don't understand.
Savings.
Yeah. And this is coming from someone, can you imagine me, like how ridiculous is that I needed him to come? I'm a recruiter. Every job I've ever gotten, I've never applied to a job on like Indeed or LinkedIn. Every job I've gotten is through networking, and it's just that fear of coming up with knowing that I have to take care of myself. And part of that is because, it was instilled in us to be strong women and take care of ourselves, but not like I couldn't have moved home, to my parents' house, but I didn't want that. I wanted to stay. I knew I couldn't call mom and dad and say, give me $10,000 so I can live in DC. No, the option would have been, I love you, come home. And I didn't want that, and so he gave me that, just comfort to be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to take time off. And then all of a sudden I remember sitting there in that exit, meeting with my team to say like, hey, I'm leaving. I literally said, I don't know if I'm going to have kids with this man, but I know that I can't keep living my life like this, and I can't work here and have a child. And there were multiple reasons for that. It was not only the stress, but it was also, the management at the time and how things were being run. And I wanted to have pride in,
and you're
where
just
I was
I'm
working.
over this. I want to do something for me, not like,
right. And so, it was all of those things. So, I had that, I'm just getting back to, I've always wanted to have kids, but I, even as a single, I literally said in that meeting, like, I don't know if I'm gonna have kids with this man or if I'm going to end up being a single parent and adopt, but like, I've always seen that for myself. So, that giving that context, because this podcast is not solved for anyone. Should you or should you not have kids? I hope all you take away from it is your decision, and there's no wrong decision.
And try to envision your life in both paths and like spend some time with it. Like, seriously, I made it like it was a little task of me that week. I had to sit with it, and it was a change. And it just so happened to be, it was in October, and it was leading into then holiday season. And then I'm around my nieces and nephews, and they're amazing and obsessed with each other. And I also wanted to have another contribution for them. Yeah. Like, because I know Angel situation.
And all of literally
situation, but it was that piece. And also like, I want to experience, like, to your point, I shouldn't, just in the way that I always wanted to be able to work remote. So I didn't have to continue to live in DC when I wanted to be more of, my outside kid at heart. I want to be able to experience life. And I know a lot of people, like our grandmother who had traveled the world, and when she was dying and getting older, she was never saying to me, you've got to go to Japan. Get to Japan before you die.
No.
She was like, oh, have children, family. And it wasn't about the things that she didn't get to do. It was like this. So
literally saying, you kids
we'll
are
be happy.
the highlight of my life.
Happy either way. Like, we don't know, like, you still have to, there's still a lot of steps in the journey, but we also do feel really lucky we have community. And if something doesn't happen, I know Morgan will give me joint custody of Angel.
Exactly. So I will say that too. Final note is, if you aren't going to have kids because of whatever reason, but you need that, you want, those kids in your life.
There are ways to mother and be a parental presence in someone's life. There's many opportunities.
And every parent, I'm telling you this right now, there's no parent on this earth that is going to say no to help. Okay. So if you want to be the auntie, whether it's birth related, genetically auntie or not, I'm taking you. So you can go ahead. Anyone local
Morgan
in Annapolis, go ahead, DM me. We will run a background
Angel.
But I will take extra support for Angel. I'm happy to go out for cocktails. Okay. Thank you. And on that note,
love it.
Love you all. Okay. Follow us. Do It for the Story Cast. It's Do It for the Story Cast on everything. YouTube, Instagram, TikTok,
Facebook, website
all the places.
Coming soon.
And
like us, review us, 5-star only,
5-star only,
Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts.
That really helps us a lot. And write us in. You know, we've already gotten some folks asking, I think, about some hair tutorials. I've got some great product reviews that are upcoming. But anything y'all want to talk about, we're here. We're an open book.
Love you all.
Peace. Love y'all. Peace.
We out.